Welcome to RES IT Store Tutorial 2000D, Configuring Table-Based Service Attributes. In this tutorial, we'll explain how to configure table-based service attributes within the IT Store. A table-based service attribute serves as a placeholder for multiple rows of data. With this type of service attribute, you can store multiple rows of data in a table structure. This reduces the number of service attributes that is required in a service to store related data. For example, because people may use multiple devices when they interact with your RES IT Store environment, it can be useful to store the data about these devices in a single service attribute. When using this type of service attribute in a workflow action of a service, it can become easier to provide different values based on the device that is used. This may also be very useful for integrations of IT Store with third-party solutions such as mobile device management systems. Let's open our IT Store console. In the Service Category section, select a service and click Edit this service to open the service window. Click Attributes and Add. In the Name field, specify the name of the service attribute. In the Type field, specify the service attribute type, in this case Table. Select Table Columns to specify columns and row values manually. Select Copy from Service Attribute of Type Table to use the column and row values of another table-based service attribute. When copying the values of the service attribute from another one, the Table Column area and the Initial Value tab will show a read-only view of the columns and rows of this service attribute. The initial value will be the value of this service attribute when the subscriber is subscribed to this service. Select Copy from People attribute of Type Table to use the column and row values of a table-based People attribute. When copying the values of a service attribute from a People attribute, the Table Column area will show a read-only view of the columns of this People attribute. It will not be possible to provide the initial values. Values need to be provided via the Person's People attribute. For now, we will select Table Columns to specify column and rows manually. In the Table Columns area, specify the columns of the table. When adding a column, select Mandatory Column to specify the values in this column are mandatory. Now we'll add a few more columns to the table. Use the arrows to configure the order of the columns. You can add a maximum of 32 columns. A message will be shown if the maximum is reached. If you first link the service attribute to another one, and then select Table Columns, the table of the other service attribute will be copied. This makes it easier to create a new table. Click the Initial Values tab to specify the initial values and rows of the table. This tab is shown as a read-only if the service attribute is linked to another table-based service attribute. It will not be shown if the service attribute is linked to a table attribute of a People attribute. Use the individual fields to specify the values in the rows. A new row will be added automatically when you specify the first value of an empty row. Mandatory columns are shown in bold. Double-click the values in the list to edit them. You can add a maximum of 512 rows. A message will be shown if the maximum is exceeded. Use the arrow keys to configure the order of the rows. Now let's look how we can use a table-based service attribute in our workflow. Select Workflow, click Add, and Send Message. You can use a table-based attribute as a placeholder in a workflow. For example, you can use it to personalize messages that are sent to the actors involved in the delivery of a service. You can use values of columns, rows, or even the entire table. When a table is used in an Invoke Runbook action, you can link it to parameters of the Runbook Results tab and provide values for the service attribute, provided that the Runbook parameter format matches the format of the table-based service attribute. This concludes this RES IT Store tutorial. For additional information on RES IT Store and RES IT Suite, please visit www.ressoftware.com.